I have been on a spiritual growth journey for the last 10 or so years, and I was making small improvements and growing little by little over the years. But there's one shift that brought about a massive growth in me, and that happened starting in that big shift started happening when I read Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment, in 2023. Before that, I was living a life mostly driven by ego. There was fear, anxiety, insecurity. There was trying to control things, predict things, fear of uncertainty, and controlling and perhaps even manipulating my loved ones in the name of doing what's best for them. And that included wanting them to grow, wanting them to go on the spiritual path because I was benefiting so much from it. But if you think about it, that was controlling and manipulation. What I wasn't doing was surrendering to life and flowing with life. And that's where Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment, which I read in 2023, shifted everything for me. This book taught me what surrender actually means. I think surrender is one of the most misunderstood spiritual concepts. Surrender does not mean giving up. It does not mean I'm going to do nothing. It does not mean I'm going to just become a doormat to be pushed around by other people. Surrender means to stop resisting life and instead flowing with life. It means we still take action, but we take it from a place of trust, not resistance. So once I understood practically, because the surrender experiment is Michael's story of his own life, of how he practiced surrender at various stages. Once I understood this example of how surrender can look like, I started to take my own baby steps towards surrender in my own life. And that is where this massive shift started, because I started to stop resisting life. And when I say baby steps, I did it with small things like what Michael Singer calls low-hanging fruit. So for example, traffic and weather. We become so upset when, let's say, for example, it's raining when I was planning to have an outdoor picnic or planning on going hiking. And then you're like, why did it have to rain? And we're resisting and suffering. And it's just our mind and our preference that causes this suffering. And that's very easy to do. That's easy to see in small things like when the weather or traffic does not cooperate our way. For example, to give you an example, in traffic, when the driver in front of me is driving too slow, and then I'm upset, or when I just happen to get a series of red lights when I'm running late for an appointment. So in these small situations of life, which are called the low-hanging fruit by Michael, if we can practice just surrendering and accepting and trying to relax and release and not cause so much misery and suffering inside of ourselves, that's a great place to start practicing surrender. So that's what I have been doing, and I find that it's easier to do with the low-hanging fruit, obviously, but I'm also trying to do it with, let's say, my conversations with loved ones, because there's so many opportunities to get triggered. I have two kids. One is a preteen and one is a teenager, and there's ample opportunities for me to practice surrender there. And so I have been doing that, and I'm finding that as a result of doing that, I feel lighter, I feel more joyful. Things that used to bother me a lot before either bother me less or not at all. And also my reaction time, where let's say I'm angry or upset, that is much, much shorter now. So I may not be able to quickly just, accept or laugh it away, but if, let's say, before something kept me annoyed for an hour, it's now maybe 5 seconds, depending on the situation. Before, if something kept me sad for days, now I'm able to get over it and come to a place of peace and calm much more faster. So learning to stop resisting life is the one thing that I think has shifted my whole life, and I know that it's going to continue to do that as I practice more and more. And if you're interested to know how I actually practice, what are the techniques, I'll just share some names right here, but I can't make this video too long. But I do this through meditation, journaling. I have tried a bit of EFT tapping, and Michael calls this the technique of relaxing and releasing, and I can elaborate on how I do that. So if you want me to elaborate on any of these techniques of how I practically, in the moment of being triggered, what do I exactly do to relax and release and move from being sucked into that situation to kind of zooming out and observing myself, going into the witness consciousness, just comment below whichever thing you want me to elaborate on, and I'll be happy to make detailed videos on those topics. And I just wanted to emphasize that it's not that reading one book changed my life. It's reading it and then actually applying the concepts. And what helped me to apply the concepts was I then read his other books, and then I listened to Michael Singer's talks, his podcast regularly, and the repetition helped to really get the message, because the way of living that Michael is trying to teach is pretty much the opposite of what we are taught, how we are brought up as kids. So to undo decades and decades of that conditioning, to rewire our programming, it needs a lot of repetition. So I recommend listening to his talks many times. And then at some point, you have to go from consuming to implementing. So instead of just consuming his books and talks and other material, make tiny changes. Select one thing from his books or talks that you just consumed and try to implement just one tiny change in your life before getting into the trap of consuming more, because sometimes that can be an escape mechanism too. We get stuck in the cycle of consuming, and then we are like, why is my life not changing? Because for any change to happen, you have to actually implement something that you learned. In the case of Michael Singer's work, you have to go inside and do the work. You have to, whether it's through meditation, mantra, journaling, and there are other techniques. But just remember to not get lost in the loop of consuming, input. Take some time to actually apply what you have learned into your life for you to be able to see changes, to be able to grow, and to live with ease.